which, don't forget, are also on BBC iPlayer. We're going to take a regular look at a hot topic from the wider world of classical music and throw it out for debate here in the gallery. No one better to introduce this strand than much-loved music evangelist Gareth Malone. This week, is there such a thing as genius?
The genius. Da Vinci, Van Gogh, Prince, Bowie, Marie Curie, Beethoven, Shakespeare, and of course this evening's composer, Mozart, all of them given that label. But what does it really mean? Is it a notion that holds true? It's a list dominated by white men, and we've created a mythology around these figures, so much so that they become the stuff of legend. Is genius a useful word, or is the entire notion problematic?
The point, as Gareth was saying, that history has often been written by white men, and that has meant that the conception of genius is bound up. It can seem socially and culturally exclusionary. So what about geniuses like Morveth Loin Owen? What about George Walker? What about the Chevalier Saint-Georges? What about Florence Price? There are so many other ways of thinking about what this idea of genius means. The problem is, though, Richard and Jane, look, I think that the problem with genius isn't so much who we think belongs in or out of pantheons, or what your collections of genii are, but rather that the concept seems to suggest there are geniuses and there are the rest of us, and that there isn't really a connection between them. Who can possibly be like Samuel Coleridge Taylor or Mozart or whoever it might be? Richard Coles. There's a problem with the word, isn't there?
Well, there is. And also, I can take the point about the narrative that we take our geniuses from is an incomplete narrative. But that will change as the world kind of opens up, and that's fantastic. But I think there are people... I mean, if Mozart were to be dethroned from genius, I'd want to kind of rethrone him, I think, because there is something so complete about his imagination, something so original, something so innovative, that although he belongs, of course, to context like all of us do, there's something he does with the raw materials which is quite exceptional, and from that anticipates the future.
You see, I suppose the thing with that is what we're trying to say, what that thing is. The descriptions of the past have often been, well, it was a divine calling, this idea of genius, that Mozart took dictation from God, whatever it might be. My point would be, Jane Glover, that he did this. It's not maybe that he's clearly he's different in terms of how he's able to alchemize musical material, but he's connected to us because he makes our emotions resonate. He's not doing something which is unrelatable to us.
Not at all. And I mean, I would agree. I would not want to take Mozart off the genius list just because he's white and male. But
no, I'm talking about getting rid of the entire idea of genius. But
I don't think you should do that either. But I think it is overused, the term genius, and I think there are very few people, possibly even fingers of two hands, that I would put on the genius list. But to people like Mozart and Shakespeare and Dostoevsky, I would add people who've actually made vaccines for us and saved the planet, actually, which I think is just as important.
No, indeed. And look, Richard, the thing that connects all of them, something you said about context, that's as true for the scientific world as it is for the musical one. Yes. This music that we're hearing tonight, Mozart had heard versions of it in symphonies by, especially the Haydn brothers, Joseph and Michael. Yeah. He's doing the same stuff. It's not like, oh, what a wonderful tune, Wolfgang. It's what he then does with it that marks a difference.
And that's what makes it belong. And that's what I think makes it belong to all ages rather than just his age. Although, I know, Jane, you've done really fascinating work on this and looking at the context in which Mozart was working, other composers, his peers at the time, and that tells a much more interesting story. Not this kind of exalted, almost sort of semi-god of the genius, but someone who is brilliant precisely because of the relationships they have with their time and their
Yes, and the other thing is, of course, they don't realise they're geniuses. They just do it. And the thing about Mozart's genius is that it's effortless. What we're hearing tonight is effortless, brilliant music, and we're about to hear the most effortlessly brilliant music, I think, with the Jupiter. But there's nothing contrived or hard in the way that you get with Beethoven, who was in his own way a genius but a lesser genius. You always hear the effort in a sense, and you don't with Mozart.
Well, you see, look, I would say both of you that especially in these pieces above all, I mean, you made the point, Jane, that he's writing these pieces kind of for himself to prove himself, right? Well, that is work. I mean, they may sound effortless, although I like the effort in the performances we're hearing tonight, that we're getting the grain and and the grit of them too. But he's pushing himself, I think, as far as we can. Look, we're going to have to leave it there. The question of genius hangs in the air. At least we have two of its finest exponents of genius, two genius exponents, Richard and Jane. Thank you. Well, look, we could go on, but back then to this evening on Mozart's final and most emotional and structure-exploding and orchestra-breakingly ambitious symphony of all, number 41, known since the 19th century. Once it wasn't Mozart's own title, as the Jupiter. Now for me, this C major symphony is written at the furthest edges of the possible for Mozart in terms of seeing how many different expressive and compositional contrasts he can cram into a single symphony. His son, Franz Xaver, considered the finale, the fourth movement, to be the highest triumph of instrumental composition. And famously, that final movement fuses sonata form, which is the standard shape of instrumental music at the time. You've heard a lot of movements already in that form this evening, with the prestigious and complex form of counterpoint from earlier music, the fugue. So here's the composer, Lloyd Coleman, to give us the skinny.